This is the Dallas Prospect Live with DDP. Every legend was once a prospect. The Dallas Prospect is funded by viewers like you through Patreon and PayPal. To support the show, visit patreon.com/the Dallas Prospect or become a member by clicking the join button. Now let the show begin.
Okay, what is up, guys? This is Derek Kirby with the Dallas Prospect, and we unfortunately have reached the official end of the Mavericks season. The Mavericks fall in this game, losing the series 4-2. The final score of this, what it end up being here, 111-97. And it's frustrating anytime you lose. But I will say I am very proud of this team's heart and fight that they displayed throughout. Now, obviously, this game was not pretty at times for the Mavericks. They were shooting halfway through the third quarter, something like 18% on three-pointers. Tim Hardaway Jr. was abysmal for most of the game, didn't get going until late. And really, by the time he got going, Dallas made one final push, got it down from 23 all the way down to 6. But by the time he was able to kind of turn things around a little bit, knock down some threes, the game had kind of gotten away from Dallas. So one thing right off the bat troubling in this game here, Dallas gave up the first 7-0 run of the first three quarters. And it wasn't until the fourth quarter that they finally kind of turned that trend around. They basically just allowed themselves to continually come out and fall into holes, and their response in the third quarter was terrible. Took them nearly 6 full minutes halfway through the third quarter before they knocked down their first field goal. Basically, it was terrible that they were sitting on 3 points for the longest time in the third quarter. However, Luka does get it going. Luka does pour in 16 points, including the final 9 Maverick points. I think 9 of the final 11 points overall for the quarter in there. 2 threes and a tough and one. Luka, I think, again, was sensational in this game. Not always perfect, but very, very good. Definitely put this team one last time for the season on his back and basically said, come with me, I'm going to take you as far as we can go. And he's one of those guys that he can carry a team by himself a great distance. I think Dallas, in this case, what nipped them in the end, rebounding was terrible for Dallas in this game. They get out rebounded by 10 in the end, but it was very lopsided for a time. And Dallas not getting to the line very well in this game. 10 of 17. Not a lot of free throws either way. The Clippers go 12 of 13. But this was a physical series throughout, and one thing that Dallas was so good at throughout the bubble play and really the regular season in general was getting to the free throw line and at a respectable rate converting that. Now, Luka in this game, 4 of 8 at the line again. I don't know what his percentage at the line ended up being for the series, but it's got to be 60% maybe. I mean, not good. He's going to have to find a way to improve there, and it's got to be something where it's just mental, because you see some of these step-back threes and deep shots he can knock down, and then you turn around and see him struggle at the line, and it can be frustrating. But all the same, Dallas had a great season for themselves. Again, let's rehash this one more time. They were projected by some people to make the playoffs, but a lot of people really thought this team was still just a little bit away, myself included. I thought they were going to have to make a trade at the deadline to bring in a third option, a true third option, which you could argue they're still lacking a true third option, especially with Hardaway being an absolute ghost in this just crucial game for Dallas here. He ends up 2 of 11 from 3, 4 of 15 from the field. I think he was 2 of his first 14. I mean, just wretched. And I know he's not healthy. He's dealing with a strained neck. And I got to imagine that's very difficult to play with. I've tweaked my neck, and I can't barely turn my head to the side, let alone play defense, run up and down a court, and curl around screens, shoot threes, all that. So I got to imagine it's very difficult. But regardless, without Kristaps Porzingis in this half of this series, but particularly in this game, you had to have a big response from several players on Dallas. And it had to be Curry, it had to be Burke, and it had to be Hardaway. Those guys give you 6 from Burke, 10 from Hardaway, and 7 from Curry. That's not going to cut it. It's not. Dallas's role players didn't do enough. You get a nice game out of Dorian Finney-Smith. I think Maxey, even though the lid stayed on the basket for him all series long, I thought he played very hard and played well. 9-6-2 for him in the game there. But overall, this is a team who they fell behind big in 4 games this series. 4 different games this series, they fell behind 20 plus. And every single time, except for game 5, they whittled it down either into 6 points or 8 points, or in the case of game 4, actually came back and won the damn game. So, yes, Eastside, that is what resilient is, when you actually fight back and keep pushing through even though you have so much adversity, even though it would be so easy for these guys to look at this. Like, you think Dallas looking at it saying, hey, Luka's on a bum ankle, Hardaway Jr.'s got a bad neck, Burke has a bum ankle, Dodo was a game time decision as well, KP's out for the series. You think they look at all those guys and the fact that they were down 23 points halfway through the third quarter with 3 points scored in the quarter, and you don't think that that is a big-time response from them, whether it's mostly on the back of Luka or not, to then rally to cut it all the way down between the last 9 of the third quarter scored by Luka and then carrying over into the fourth quarter, cutting it down to 89-82. Was it 89-82 or was it 89-83? I think they cut it to 6. It might have been 7. Regardless, brilliant resilience there from this team. This is a team that was heavily outmatched in this series, not just in terms of depth, not just in terms of veteran experience and firepower. 4 of the 5 Mavericks starters made their playoff debuts in this series. Kawhi Leonard, pretty much by himself, has more playoff experience than the Mavericks as a team. I mean, that's basically the status of this series coming in. I said if you could get them to 5 games and push them in a 6th, I would be thrilled. Here you are, you go to 6, and you showed a lot of fight and a lot of heart, even when a lot of things didn't go your way. Now, let's flip to some of the controversy in this game right out of the bat. There were people, and they're out there still on Twitter, and there are people who were dogging a little bit on my video and everything I did the other day about Marcus Morris basically making several dirty plays and saying, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's denying that he's making dirty plays, but he absolutely was headhunting out there for Luka. A lot of people thought he should have been suspended for Game 6. He's not. He's absolutely killing Dallas early on in the game. And then you see the fallout in the thumbnail of this video. Major, just Bush League garbage from Marcus Morris. Now, Luka's driving the basket. He's leaning in. You could say, hey, in some cases, especially with how this series has kind of been officiated, Luka actually could have been called for an offensive foul having that arm up, holding him out. Fine, but Marcus Morris comes down once on the top of the head with his left arm and then across the face with his other arm and rakes Luka to the ground. It's already been a physical series. It's already been chippy with a lot of bad blood, but this is Bush League. This is absolutely... Now, he's rightly finally ejected for it. He's given a flagrant 2 and ejected, and he's fouled Luka on the play anyway. Luka, unfortunately, misses like 3 of the 4 free throws in that situation, so that's god-awful. Again, he's not good at free throws right now. He's going to have to figure that answer out. But regardless, it's a dirty play, if ever there was one. And I shared on the community tab, if you've seen it already, the play itself. And him, again, his comment after Game 5, essentially saying it's ridiculous to think he would ever go after someone like that, and that he plays with morals and integrity and blah, 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 blah. Doesn't matter because we see what's happening. It's not, hey, listen to me, not your, don't trust your lying eyes, hear what I'm saying. No. We see the play, and we saw how you instigated the incident in Game 1. We saw how you continue to be extremely physical, and multiple times in Game 5 went after Luka. And now in this, you crack him over the top of the head. Yeah, we see it. Now, Tim Hardaway Jr., yeah, the game before he got Paul George in the face. Absolutely. And, there's some similarity there, but it's not like it's a retaliation from that moment the next game it's not even the right guy. You also then have the situation where he's just staying after Luka throughout. Like, the fact is, I know he's one of the guys that they threw at Luka a lot, but he's never taking these swipes at anyone else. Even if you say, hey, Hardaway got Paul George in the middle of a 30-point blowout last game, all right, fine. But at no point did Luka have anything to do with that play. Oh, he's responding for Reggie Jackson. All right, well, then you already took multiple cracks at him in last game and didn't quite manage to injure him to knock him out of the series or even a game itself. So he rolls back into this game and continues to do his work. So, yeah, Dallas needs some toughness. Yeah, you could say they need an enforcer. I don't want anything to do with Marcus Morris at all. I don't want any damn thing to do with that dude. Now, I don't even know the situation of his deal. I don't remember what contract he signed with the Knicks to go there last offseason before getting traded. What was it, at the deadline, or was it whenever? However he found his way to the Clippers. I don't want any part of him on Dallas. Now, he's a great shooter. I'm sure he's one of those guys that if he's on your team, you can deal with it a little bit more. But in some cases, I think there's just too much bad blood, and I don't think the fan base would ever embrace him for that. It'd be like, it's one thing if you just played physical and were an instigator. It's another if you've taken several very clear evidence shots at your team's young star player, and then suddenly he's in your jersey the next year, and you're just supposed to, like, disregard what happened before? No, I don't like that at all. 1 year, $15 million? Okay, there you go. What up, Nate? Salute, by the way, to Nate, our latest member for the channel. Yeah, multiple tiers if you guys want to check that out as well, that you can donate to the channel, help support what we do. In the off season, I plan to do a lot more of these kind of analysis pieces, what ifs, and even some kind of sports journalism pieces, specifically geared towards the Mavericks and Cowboys. So we'd love it if you guys could support it and check it out. But yes, you'll get for that free merch. Nate, you still need to message me where you want your shirt size and where you want it sent for a prospect shirt, exclusive behind-the-scenes content, and more. So absolutely check that out. Back to my train of thought. If he's on your team, he being Marcus Morris after all this, I don't think you can deal with that. I don't think you can just be like, yeah, that's the guy I want on my team. This dude's kind of got a reputation that precedes him, and anyone not named LA or straight up just a Morris fan in general is going to acknowledge, yeah, he absolutely was dirty throughout this series. So Dallas will have to make some serious moves there, get themselves one or two guys. I'll say this. Boban saves this game for Dallas just in the sense that he restrains Luka immediately, as you see in the thumbnail. He does not let Luka bum rush after Marcus Morris. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in that scenario. I respect the tenacity from Luka just to even jump up and try to get at him. But at the same time, I know what Marcus Morris is like in a brawl in these cases, so I don't know that I want my young star going after him in that case. That's where you want an enforcer. If Salah Mejri is still on the Mavericks, and he said this after Game 5 on Twitter, if he's still in the series, if he's still a Maverick at this point, Salah Mejri is probably jumping off the bench and sprinting after Marcus Morris. It's probably a whole blow up at mid-court or something like that. So I'm very glad in that case that we don't have that happen, because this was a great game for Dallas. Again, the heart and resilience a lot of guys showed here cannot be downplayed in any way. Luka goes for 38, 9-9 on 15 of 28 from the field, 4 of 9 from 3, hit some gutsy three-pointers as well. Played 42 minutes. I don't know what Luka's minutes per game average was in this series, but it was probably in the 40-41 range. Actually, no, it wouldn't be, because he played like 32 or 34 minutes in that Game 2 wire-to-wire win because of foul trouble in the second half. So aside from that, I think that Luka's minutes were just crazy in the series, particularly after the ankle injury the last 3 games. And you had Luka go for 42 in one game, 43 in another, and 38 Luka's arrived. Like, all the questions people might have had about Luka, like, oh, well, let's see what he can do in the playoffs when he has to go against playoff defense and, physical defenses and, a team like the Clippers, no team is better equipped to shut Luka down. Bro, they only had one game where you look at his stat line and you say, yeah, they shut him down for the most part. And in that game, he still had to roll the shit out of his ankle. Now, you could say in game 5, a lot of the stuff he did, a lot of the damage he did came during the second half when the game was already well away from Dallas. Okay, that's fair. But still, 3 games, he absolutely was, if not the best player on the court, second only to Kawhi, who I think has a very solid argument right now for being the best player in the league. I know what LeBron's doing. I know what Anthony Davis is doing. I get it. I'm still saying I think it's Kawhi when he wants to play, when he gets to that mode, whether it's and this was a bad shooting game for Kawhi by his standards, too. He ends with 33, 14, and 7, which is crazy. 14 of 23 is not bad, but he starts the game not clicking very well. Paul George started out fine, but Kawhi Leonard got off to a slow start, and the fact that the Clippers, through much of that first quarter, carried a pretty decent lead was a little bit concerning. But Dallas was still able to respond. And I think Luka definitely made his statement, issued a statement here that he is officially a superstar in this league. Any doubts people might have had, I think you have to disregard those at this point because he showed out. He absolutely stepped up and proved he is one of the 10 best players, no doubt. And you could say, especially on the offensive end, he's probably in the top 5 best offensive players in the league at this point, especially when you look at the total picture of his impact and what he can do. And the clutch factor, yes, I'm going to still say it's a clutch factor because you saw whether I realized what he was as in the season. I realized what the Mavericks as a team were in the clutch this season. But you saw it on a playoff stage, how he kept mounting these comebacks for Dallas, that he kept dragging his team back into the mix and keeping them alive and keeping, therefore, in this game, their season alive and keeping hope alive, basically, for this team that looked listless. As they were 18% on threes midway through the third quarter, you saw guys out there just looking flat on energy, slumping their shoulders a little bit. And he basically just said, no, I don't care. I don't care that half the quarter's gone and we've done nothing. I'm going to carry this. Suddenly you're looking at it and he's got 16 points 16 points in that frame alone. So yes, great response, great tenacity. That's clutch. I don't care in that case. You're talking about your season could not be hanging more in the balance. And even though, if you think about it, like momentum is like a teeter-totter, even though it's solidly in the Clippers' favor, that's Luka pulling it back to damn near even before ultimately it kind of just it doesn't even get away from him. Kawhi just basically was like, oh, okay, yeah, I still have Terminator mode as well, and now I'm going to knock down 4 straight mid-range jumpers on you guys like it's nothing. And then Luka finally misses a shot going the other way. They get then a transition 3 to Reggie Jackson, and suddenly what was cut down to like 6 or whatever is suddenly back to 11 and then 13, and it just kind of kept going back and forth like that. They never quite got over that hump again, but it's a great season. Dallas answered a lot of questions, proved a lot of people, including myself, wrong in terms of what I saw as the overall ceiling for this team. And what, frankly, I thought Luka could be in year 2. I thought Luka, as he continued forward, could emerge as an MVP candidate, like, down the road. I didn't think he was going to be as close as he was, like a top 5 finish this year. And then you saw how he was in the bubble and in the playoffs, and you think, yeah, had he had that reputation the whole way through the season, he, for a while he was in the top 3, and then come January he kind of drifted back into the middle of the pack a little bit. But still, if you had the bubble play and playoffs, you would look at that and you'd say, yeah, that dude's in your top 3 or top 4 for sure. So it is what it is. Do I think we need a new coach? No, I don't think we need a new coach. I think Carlisle is still the guy for the job. Nick Nurse is a fantastic coach, no doubt. Coach of the year, without Kawhi this year, has Toronto still looking like they've barely missed a beat. I know they got beat pretty good by Boston today, but still, I think Carlisle is your guy for now. I think you don't worry about Carlisle until you get another year down the road. If Dallas gets pieces and it doesn't work out, or they can't move far into the postseason after like this next year, then maybe you can take an evaluation there. But I think you're fine with what you got right now, because I think Carlisle had a pretty good playoff series in this case. I think you look at pound for pound what the Clippers had up and down their roster, and the way the series was officiated for the most part, by which I mean the haves versus the have-nots. In a lot of cases, Luka, and I can't remember, I didn't share this on the channel yet. Let me see here. I might be able to pull it up on the fly actually here, if you just give me a moment. But I took an example of what Luka had to finish a basket through on one end of the floor to get an and one, versus what Kawhi in this same game was able to get an and one call on. Luka's technical in this game. He drives the basket, and he does give a little bit of a push with his arm to create that space. Paul George is riding his hip. He's out of position. It is an offensive foul. I'm not arguing that. My point is, while Luka gets called for the offensive foul and kind of flips the ball to the ref and then gets a subsequent technical, you look at what Kawhi Leonard does every time he attacks the basket, and he's doing the same thing, but it's never called. In fact, Kawhi got called for an offensive foul in a similar situation, just trying to square up Seth Curry in this game, and everyone was kind of like, holy crap, they called Kawhi for an offensive foul for pushing off. Is it Christmas? This never happens. That pretty much encompasses the officiating in this series. And my problem with the kind of flipping back real quick to the Marcus Morris situation, his attempting to hurt Luka in Game 5, we've seen throughout this playoffs, not just this series, but in the NBA playoffs in general this year, the NBA does not have a real problem, as my stream lags just a little bit, the NBA does not have a real problem with ejecting guys from games. So the fact that he was able to kind of coast through that, not even have like any real decision ever announced as if like, hey, we're looking into this. Yeah, he didn't ever have to face anything, and then it took him cracking Luka twice in the head on the same drive and then kind of standing over him and looking down at him for there to finally be something where the officials are like, yeah, taken all together with how he's kind of handled himself and conducted himself this series, I'm starting to think that these are intentional. Yes, they are. And then between quarters, this is from Callie Kaplan on Twitter, you have Doc Rivers basically saying that he disagreed with the ejection and said that the only reason that it was even called, let me try and find the exact quote here. Yeah, between quarters on ESPN, Doc Rivers said he does not agree with the Morris ejection. He says, quote, I think he got ejected because he's Marcus, to be honest. I know you got to defend your players, but you don't have to have your head that far up your ass, Doc. Like, it's okay. It's okay to say, like, yeah, it's a physical series. Here's those plays, by the way. So this is Luka's drive.
Luka takes the hit.
He has to finish through this contact.
Principles, they gamble, trying to overextend. Kawhi Leonard uses that upper body strength.
Tell me where the foul is. I'll run that one more time because I think the stream might have had a hiccup.
The basketball up the floor.
Here's
make
Luka.
A play. Luka takes the hit. Defensive principles, they gamble, trying to overextend. Kawhi Leonard uses that upper body strength.
That foul, by the way, was called on Trey Burke. Ridiculous. He's pushed. He is shoved by Kawhi before the drive, touches nothing but air, and Kawhi gets the easiest and one of his life. You have situations like that in this series that really just feels like Dallas is having to work against the Clippers, who they're already overmatched against, and then the officials, and that's never fun. But, I'm not going to linger on it too long. Ramji, what was Doc supposed to say? I already said what he was supposed to say. You just acknowledge, like, yeah, tensions are high. It's, I haven't had a good look at it yet. There's ways you can BS your way through that without just full denial in that case. Like, I didn't have a great look at it or whatever. Tensions have been high. we'll just have to see. But it's unfortunate to lose him. He was having a great game. He's got to be smarter than that if that's the case. Better answer. 3-pointers were a just absolute killer today. Let's see. As I'm looking through some of my notes here. So yeah, as we were sitting at the half, Hardaway, Curry, and Burke had 4 points each. I said they didn't show up in this game. Not only Hardaway eventually reached double digits with 10, and it was pretty much when the game was out of reach. Richard Jefferson at halftime talking about how, quote, "We have seen Luka and Porzingis getting into multiple scuffles. They have no enforcer. That's going to be on their Christmas wish list. They need to get tougher." I don't know that it's that. I think when he says they need to get tougher, I think he is saying like the Mavericks, not Luka and KP, because you saw both of them show willingness to step into the fray and mix it up a little bit. I just think that Dallas needs someone that can protect them in that case. Hardaway started 0 of 6 on threes. Speaking to someone talking about the 3-point shooting in this game. This was coming into the game. This was from Bobby Carella, and he even kind of joked like, "Oh, this is all my fault for the Mavericks," and specifically Hardaway Jr.'s 3-point shooting in this game. Hardaway, during the playoffs, coming into the game, averaged 19.4 points per game on 55.6% effective field goal rate, 39.5% from 3. He only committed 2 turnovers despite taking 80 shots and handing out 10 assists. He said he's been a huge factor offensively, especially given the absence of Porzingis and Doncic at times in this series. He had a pretty good series. That's not to say that he didn't take some knuckleheaded ass shots, because he absolutely did. And he was brutal in the start of this game, starting out 2 of 14, I think 0 of 6. And at times he's airballing mid-range jump shots, and you're just like, oh, God, okay. Seth Curry, where's Seth Curry? Where's Seth Curry? Oh, Seth Curry's got 4 shots in the fourth quarter or something, like through the game at that point. Like, Curry, you played 29 minutes in this game. I need you to get more shots. The Clippers defense was good. It was swarming, but yeah, not great. I mentioned earlier the Mavericks being behind 23 at one point. Brad Townsend kind of points out that at one point Dallas went from a 48-47 deficit with 5:14 left in the second quarter to a 69-52 hole at the time with 7:40 left in the third quarter. That's a 21-5 run over the course of 9.5 minutes and change. That was a huge thing. This is an area of growth for Dallas. I mentioned, now Clippers are a very good team as well, but I mentioned how Dallas had a propensity to fall behind by 20 plus points in this series. Happened in 4 games, if I'm not mistaken. They absolutely have to figure out a way not to let that happen. And part of that falls to Luka, part of that falls to Rick. You can certainly say Rick there. But I think in a lot of cases here in the third quarter, and as that part is concerned, there just was a lid on the basket. And Dallas was settling for too many outside shots. I think that even when they finally broke through a little bit, it was Luka hitting a 3, and it wasn't a 3. Looking at how they were shooting, it's a shot that you see Luka take, and you're like, oh, that's not a good shot. Oh, okay, he made it. All right, well, F it, he made it. I guess I'll call it a good shot. But that's just kind of how the game progressed. That third quarter was abysmal for Dallas, which is one of those key Achilles heels that we've talked about before. And, it bit them. And a lot of times in this series with them falling behind, whether it was the first half or the third quarter, things would get away from them. And they showed resilience in every situation. Game 5 is the only time they weren't able to really make much of an effort to push back. They showed resilience, which is great, but you can't get in that situation in the first place, because there is something to be said about if you're relatively even with your opponent, then you let them get out to a huge lead. Now you got to expend all this crazy energy mounting a comeback. Over the course of a series, you keep doing that again and again and again. Eventually, you're not going to have enough in the tank that even if you almost draw even again, that you're now going to be able to overcome it. Because as we saw in the case of the Clippers a couple times this series, they basically weathered the storm and just relied on their superstars, in this case, Kawhi. And Paul George started great in this game, didn't do a whole lot overall, I don't think. I think he ended up with, 15 points, 9 and 7. Yeah, Paul George was not a factor here. 6 of 19. That's a shame that he laid another stinker, and that you did not have a situation either with Patrick Beverley, but it's still very much something that needs to be talked about. How they would fall behind, have to mount all this energy to get a comeback, and then you're just running out of gas, and the other team has one of the best players on the planet, if not the best, and therefore is able to then just kind of be like, all right, cool, now I'm going to just roll with like 4 straight baskets, and let's see if you can keep up now that we've gotten back to even footing. Oh, you're low on gas right now? All right, well, I'm just going to help my team pull away a little bit again. And that's what happened. And they set up, their role players hit huge threes. Reggie Jackson hit a couple big threes for them. Reggie Jackson in the game off the bench, 14 points, 4 threes. Very good production for him, 14 and 5 in 27 minutes. Shamet, he hit a couple big threes, but he had 9 points. Zubats, 15 and 11. He did his work against us. He's done all series. And, it's a good thing Marcus Morris did get ejected because in 11 minutes he had 9 points, 4 of 5 from the field. Dude was feasting. So, worked out for us. And Lou Williams only had 5 points on 1 of 9 shooting. Man, oh man, if not for Dallas just not being able to buy a bucket for a good stretch of this game, you can't help but feel that this was a very gettable game. It's resilient how they fought back and how they tried to persevere throughout that conflict. But at the same time, you look at it. Salute to our new subscriber. You look at it and you just can't help but feel like it was there. It was gettable. It was right there if you just could have held tight a little bit longer. Or if you just had 1 or 2 guys step up a little more. Maybe Hardaway doesn't shoot 0 of 6 to start the game. Maybe Curry knocks down 2 or 3 more baskets, and instead of 7 points, we're talking about 14, 15 points out of Curry. That suddenly feels a lot better. Like, you look at these kind of situations and you see these different areas where it's like just a little more here, maybe a little more there, and we have a different ball game. But, them's the breaks. It's a great learning experience for this team. And we knew that if they were to pull off any kind of long shot comeback to win the series, it was going to basically take every last drop of fuel in the tank, and you were going to have 3 or 4 guys in addition to Luka raise their games to a crazy new level. And unfortunately, here we are in an elimination game, and it felt like only really Luka was truly there. Luka, and I'll give Dorian Finney-Smith huge credit in this game. Dorian Finney-Smith with 16, 6, and 4, including 6 of 11 from the field. A lot of great energy plays again. 2 of 5 from 3 in 37 minutes. Great game from him. And I think Maxey showed some heart as well. But some quick notes here for where I feel like Dallas needs to look. I think they still need a secondary ball handler. I still think they should look at Trey Burke because I think that's a very gettable deal. I think you can bring him back for a very respectable deal without having to pay too much because he's never really fit or landed somewhere where he could put down roots. In fact, I think that's a big part of why he's floated around this league so much, despite being a lottery pick for the Jazz back in the day. I just think that they fairly early on in that experiment moved him, and then he starts kicking around, kind of like you might see with Dennis Smith Jr., honestly. And so he never really gets a chance to plant roots and develop in a place where his development can really, really be nurtured there. And I think Rick Carlisle is a great coach for him, and I think he fits this offense great. I saw someone mention in the comments the possibility of getting Van Vliet. I love Van Vliet. I think the cost would be possibly more than you would have to do for Burke, so I don't rule it out, but at the same time, I do, and this is where it's a mixed bag, right? Where it's a two-way. I'm trying to find the right phrase here, what I'm trying to say. This is where it's a little dangerous, let's say, because on one hand, you want to respect and acknowledge the player who just balled out for you, the guy who just made a huge impact for your team. Giving Trey Burke a new deal sends a message to the players like, hey, he earned every inch of this, and he deserves it. We're rewarding him with a new contract to come back. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just could be a 2 or 3 year deal or something like that with respectable money. And now you got a solid guy that can be a real spark plug for you. Versus if you go try and get someone else, then you run the risk of kind of sending that message that like, yeah, we don't care what you as the player did for us. We care about what makes sense for us and the bigger picture in this case. And we've seen Dallas in the past constantly chase that big fish. And while I do think they have certainly more reason to believe that they're going to be more successful now than they've ever had reason to believe in the past, I still think you want to send the message of we're going to reward this guy because he earned it and because he makes sense. You don't want to pay old veterans if you don't have to. Hell, I saw people on Twitter making the case for trying to bring in Carmelo Anthony as a bench player. He fits in Terry Stott's system. Obviously, Stott's part of the Carlisle coaching tree, so you look at that and you're like, if he works there, and he kind of laid out the blueprint for how you use Carmelo now, could you use him here in Dallas? And I must admit, as shocked as I am to say it, that's not a terrible argument if we're talking about a short-term thing. And I stress short-term thing. If we're talking like a year with maybe like a team option or something, I still don't want to go crazy there, but I don't know, something to consider. I think in this case where you can find upgrades, I think you need a real 3-and-D guy. And if you find a third option, he needs to be a two-way player. And that's why I think if you're talking about spending significant money, unless you're talking about bringing in like another superstar level guy, you need to look at a guy that's real 3-and-D for this team. They got holes to fill, obviously, with KP being lost for the series. Your front court depth could not have been thinner, and that partly helped Zubac, although he fed just fine throughout the season against the Mavericks, even when they were at full strength in the front court. It allowed him to thrive. So, yeah, I think that Dallas could use a little bit more there, possibly, but at the same time, I think 3-and-D is a huge thing for them. Steven Adams. Yeah, Steven Adams is a popular one. That's a huge contract to bring in. He's still like 26 years old or something crazy, even though it feels like he's been around forever. And because of that, I think Dallas is probably not the best fit for him because Steven Adams, he's a great screen setter, solid rebounder, good defender, not great on the perimeter, though, and so the modern game exposes him a bit. Once again, in the Houston-Oklahoma City series, OKC's kind of having difficulty playing him at length because the way Houston attacks him with their ultra-small ball attack. And I would hate to have a guy that we're spending, $26 million or something on and not be able to know that you can go out there and play him. Like, you got to bench him in a playoff game because, this team's attacking him in pick and roll situations, and the guy he's guarding is able to stretch out to the 3-point line, and suddenly we can't do what we need to there. That's a real big boulder of a contract weighing down your bench if that's the case. Upside down Luka Magic. It took me just a moment to figure out what that was, Robert. Marketing would be interesting. That would be another young guy of interest. Vucevic just got a new deal, though, didn't he? Am I insane? I feel like he got a new deal because we were talking about a possible trade previously for him, and that ended up not materializing. Maybe I'm imagining it. The trade deadline of last year literally feels like... see, right there, I just said of last year. The previous trade deadline feels like an eternity ago. So you'll forgive me if I'm just totally off basis on him having a new deal. I could be wrong. Joel Embiid's another interesting case because I think Philadelphia is effed. I think that with the way they blew out their contracts on their starting lineup, basically, Tobias Harris, that deal really killed them. Speaking about the Clippers, that was a trade they made. Joel Embiid, they're going to have to move on from either Embiid or Simmons. If I'm them, I move on from Simmons and keep Embiid. But at the same time, Embiid can be a knucklehead in his own case. So I don't know. Maybe he's going to be enough of a problem for them behind the scenes that they are more interested in that case to moving him. Let's see. In all the times I've been talking about, if John Collins is available, you go get him, Rafa. And all the talk I've been making, there it is, Bubba, with the confirmation 4 for 100 for Vucevic. For all the conversation that we've been having about why this season and the series in particular was a success, I think, for the Mavericks, I think it also needs to be said that you had the ultimate adversity of KP basically missing 3.5 games. I mean, that's insane. He played only like half of game one. Specifically played 20 minutes, had 14 and 6 as his stat line. Played all of game 2 and all of game 3. He played 2.5 games, missed 3.5 more, and he tore the lateral meniscus on his right knee, not the surgically repaired left knee. He tore that in game 1 early on, going for an offensive rebound. And that means he dropped 35 and 13 in game 3 on one knee, basically. That means he had, like 23, I think, in game 2, 23 and 6 or something. Again, respectable production, man. It's super frustrating, and I understand that, but at the same time, I'm not ready to give up on KP. I understand why people say, like, hey, look at the overall picture. This isn't the picture of someone you can build around long term because of his health issues. I think you can. I really think you can, because you have to continue working with him through this. He put on a lot of extra muscle earlier in the year. He added about 20 pounds of muscle coming into the season, but then with the 4 months and change lost due to the season suspending for the pandemic, he admitted going into the bubble that, and he was excellent in the bubble. We know he was like 30 and 11 in the bubble for his averages. And then he was great in this series when he was able to play. In 20 minutes of game 1, had 14 and 6. In game 2, he had like 23, I think. And then in game 3, in like 36 minutes or something, he had 36 and 13 or 35 and 13, something crazy like that. But he lost a bunch of that muscle in that 4-month layoff, that new muscle he had added on. And he said, through a lot of the early part of the season, not only was it knocking off the rust, but it was kind of adjusting to my new body, the way it felt a little bit. It was heavier. It didn't feel quite as fluid. And in the bubble, that helped him play at a higher level for a time, higher than like his all-star level was in New York that one season, because he was able to basically lean on like, hey, I feel more natural and fluid now. The rust has been knocked off, and now suddenly this feels easier for me. But you saw the flip side of that then, where his body didn't have that resistance against it. Basically what I'm saying here is I think it's a little bit of extenuating circumstances with the layoff leading him to lose some of that added muscle that did seem to help him. Yes, he had soreness in that right knee as well during the season, missed 10 games in late December, early January before he came back and then went off. I don't know why I snapped to say went off. Went off after the Dwight Powell injury. That's when he basically broke through to a new ceiling, and then he broke to an even higher ceiling in the bubble. He's 1 year in now, officially 1 year into a 5-year, $153 million deal, one of those. I think it's worth seeing what you can do here with him. I'm not moving on from KP yet. And I think it's funny that Knick fans are so desperate for any win that they can get. They're trying to flex. They're trying to flex on, so good that we traded KP and we got 2 first-round picks out of it. Bro, have you not seen what the Mavericks are? Have you not been watching? Even if KP's not available, have you not seen what Luka's bringing the Mavericks up to at this point? Those picks are going to be in the 20s. You got nothing, son. You got a bag of peanuts. And I say that as someone who was a big Dennis Smith Jr. Fan and hopeful that he would break through and actually be, at the very least, a solid player here in Dallas. If he couldn't be a co-star with Luka, I wanted him to be a solid piece. It just didn't happen. It did not happen. So it is what it is. And yes, to Ranger King's point here, you also got Tim Hardaway Jr. You also got Trey Burke, even though you sent him away in the summer. Well, let him go in the summer. Brought him back. You also got Trey Burke out of that deal. And the only guy who really never did anything for you was Courtney Lee. And that's just because, he was a steady veteran hand that they didn't really ever seem that interested in playing. So any notion the Knicks fans saying that they were smart for trading KP or that they somehow won that trade, hilarious. You're talking about a team that hasn't been to the playoffs in 7 years? They're so hungry and desperate for any little victory they can claim that they're celebrating a guy having a minor injury that, yes, it cost him the final 3 games of this playoff series, but we're talking about an injury that, depending on what route he goes, it might be a matter of weeks before he's completely good to go again, Or if he has surgery, then yes, it might be a few months before he's quite right. But I don't think it's going to terribly impact him for the start of next season, which, by the way, holy shit, starts in December, end of December. We are going to be talking NBA basketball again here very soon, not just for free agency wish list or anything like that, but in general, just for the season picking back up, which is crazy to think about. Comments have been rolling by here, so sorry if I'm missing some of your guys' comments. As Ranger King did, tag me. You want to make sure I see it? Tag me, because that shit shows up bright orange for me and I can't miss it. If you're just asking a question without a tag, it gets quickly swept up in the line of comments and I don't see it. I had a meniscus tear in December, not an easy injury. Well, you know, there's cases where it was a big detriment for NBA players and a case where it wasn't a huge issue. When Russell Westbrook, that first year without James Harden, after they traded James Harden to Houston, OKC had it was the start of the Westbrook-Patrick Beverley beef. They collide with Beverley after a timeout was called, lunging for the ball, going through Russ's knee, tore the meniscus, cost him the rest of the postseason. OKC, who had been the number 1 seed that year, gets bounced in the second round without Russ. They lose to the Grizzlies. And OKC wanted to go the ultimate precautious route. They wanted to have the surgery to make sure he could come back to 100%, because if you do what's called trimming the torn meniscus, I say like what's called as if I was giving some quick shorthand and then I literally just described what they do. They trim the tear of the meniscus and it gets you back faster, but it will have an impact on your mobility, on your explosiveness, things like that. So OKC said, hey, we want to make sure you're 100%, and so we're going to do the full surgery. Well, guess what? He ended up having to have 3 surgeries over the course of the next year. It didn't go well for him. He did get back to where he needs to be. Russell Westbrook now, I think, is, I don't know if I'd say as explosive as ever, but he's certainly still a damn explosive player, one of the most explosive players in the league. Got back to pretty much where he needed to be ultimately. For other former Rocket, Patrick Beverley, he tore his meniscus like a year later, trimmed it because his game's not built on athleticism, and he was back just a few weeks later like he didn't really miss much of a beat. So there's different routes you can go. Dizzy, we need a strong body type and a player like 6'6" to help in defense and offense with a good history of big shots in the clutch situations. A 3-and-D guy. That's what we need, a 3-and-D guy. We need a wing body type. Is he repeating the comment? Yeah. Dallas needs to draft or trade for a stretch 4/5. Dallas also needs a secondary ball handler, playmaker, and an elite 3-and-D wing. Yeah, I think Burke fills the role pretty well for a secondary ball handler. I'm not saying he's a perfect fit all in that case, but I do think he does a respectable job in that role. I would like to not have Luka's usage rate be so crazy high, but at the same time, having a guy that can defend and shoot threes, as Dilly Dilly is screaming Tristan Thompson in the comments, yeah, I don't know if Tristan Thompson's what I want to go with, but I understand what you're talking about. A stretch 4 or 5, that could help because Maxey and Dwight aren't great three-point shooters. Maxey, in this series, he tanked as a three-point shooter, but I think he was having to expend so much energy on defense guarding Kawhi that it kind of sapped it out of him, and then I think he got into his head because he hit just a brutal stretch where he missed like 15 out of 16 threes to open the series, and he didn't finally knock down a couple until literally the last 2 games. So the Mavericks are the only team in the league this year not to lose 3 straight games. That's another thing to hang your hat on. That shows this team responds well to adversity. Marc Gasol would be intriguing. Marc Gasol, I'd be curious to see what he's got in the tank. I know he was still pretty solid for them in Toronto for their title run. I'd be curious to see, but it's not a long-term pick or view I have there. Sadek Bey, Josh Green, good first round for our options 3-and-D. They are, from what I've seen, I'm not a draft guru. I'll be frank with you there. But I have heard that Dallas is looking to trade out of the first round. Dallas is kind of reverting back to what they've always been under Cuban, which is to say, unless we're picking high, we're not going to worry about the draft and we're going to move on. We're going to trade it for capital to try and do something else, What that is, I don't know, but they might not be in position for either of those guys. We just need championship leaders. We do, but we do also need a 3-and-D guy. A true number 3 scorer would ideally be that 3-and-D guy, and I think a little bit of help in the front court. But let's see, as everything's rolling in at this point. I'd love to see them make a move for Jeremy Grant. Jeremy Grant is absolutely someone I want in here. I watched him his couple years he was with Oklahoma City closely. He's doing great for Denver. I think he is absolutely a guy that is very affordable and would have a tremendous impact on this team. He can guard 1 through 4. He's got length, he's got great athleticism, and he's actually improved as a shooter, which is crazy because he was not a good 3-point shooter in OKC. I think he's actually improved considerably there. So very interesting. Rosario asking about Melo. I mentioned earlier, I actually, as shocked as I am to say it, could see a scenario where Melo would be an intriguing fit here. Seeing that someone finally figured out how to use him, and that being Terry Stotts, a Carlisle coach tree guy there. I think that there's a lot to be said for his ability to fit here as a third scoring option in Dallas. Now, he's not going to help your case defensively or anything like that, but you can absolutely get that third big-time shot maker, which would be nice. And hey, for whatever it's worth, he played with KP before. Granted, he was in a very different role at that time. Valuing the draft would be the smartest move. Mavs still haven't learned anything from the Raptors or Spurs. I agree. I'm not in any way saying I am in favor of their history in terms of how they treat the draft or, the reported rumor of them thinking of trading out of the first round already. I'm not in favor of it, but we'll see what they end up doing. Rosario, keep killing it. Appreciate it. Leo, I want an enforcer. I would like an enforcer too, and I think they need one. In fact, Tim McMahon said that people within the Mavs organization told him months ago that is absolutely on their wish list for this summer and circled to get 1 or 2 solid defensive pieces that can bring that toughness and edge. And I think that's kind of a way of saying enforcer. $20 million a year for Van Vliet would be better than $18 million for Hardaway. Yeah, I still think Dallas is probably going to look to keep Hardaway. I think that's what they'll do. I do think there are questions depending on what the contract ends up looking like about if it's the best picture. I've contended for a little while now that while I think he's probably earned himself a new contract here, I still tend to think he can't be your third guy. He needs to be like your fourth guy. You need to get someone else who can serve that third role. And instead of asking him to be, I know he averaged like 15.3 or 15.8 this season for Dallas, but he stepped up in the playoffs until this game, was averaging 19.4 and all of that. I think in that case, you look at it and say, if we have him averaging 13, 14 a game as a fourth option, but we got another guy in here that's 3-and-D, and maybe he'll have big scoring nights or maybe he'll just be a lockdown defender, that's great. That opens things up. I think that's a better move, having Hardaway as your number 4 guy, but he'll probably be sticking around, I think. I think Hardaway isn't worth more than $12 million a year. Well, he's damn sure getting more than $12 million a year pretty much regardless of where he goes, unless it's like a 1-year deal probably. So, any comment on Maxey? Thought he struggled from the 3-point line. Oh my God, did he struggle from the 3-point line. I said earlier he missed like 15 of his first 16 threes in this series. Again, he played as great of defense as Dallas could have possibly hoped anyone could play on Kawhi in this series, and I think it just took it out of him. As far as his legs on his lift for his 3-point shooting. Not that he uses a lot of legs anyway. And then I think he just hit a, honest-to-God shooter's slump. That happens. When you're not a great shooter in general, you'll hit a slump, and then suddenly it's like, instead of just being like, man, I've missed a few, it starts kind of getting into your head, and then suddenly you start kind of questioning your mechanics a little bit, and you start aiming it. There were definitely times where Maxey looked like he was more so aiming his shots than he was just teeing them up and taking him in a fluid motion, but he absolutely struggled. I like Maxey. I love Maxey. I think if Dallas were to make a trade in the offseason to bring in a guy, like let's say they went a sign and trade route instead of just trying to outright sign a guy, then I imagine Maxey would be part of that package going out. And, as much as I love Maxey, you got to do what makes the most sense. And if you're talking about like a Bradley Beal type scenario where suddenly you pull off that damn trade, yeah, you're sending Maxey and almost whatever else other than Luka and I would argue KP that you can to get a Bradley Beal. At the trade deadline, they could add Markieff Morris in a second. He is an enforcer. But he's nowhere near the scorer that Marcus is. I watched him. He was a buyout contract for OKC in the playoffs 2 years ago, or was it just last year? I forget. But he was hot garbage for them. Couldn't buy a bucket to save his life. He is an enforcer. He does have that toughness and attitude to him that his brother has, but he is not a guy that I'm looking to pay any notable money to. And I still think it would be awkward bringing in the twin brother of the guy that took multiple cheap shots at your star. They have to keep Maxey. He's got a great deal. He is a great deal, and I love Maxey, but you have to do what makes sense. Again, if you're getting Bradley Beal, that's your 3-and-D guy right there. That's a guy who on any given night can give you 30. Yeah. You take Bradley Beal every damn time. That's a guy that can create. That dude can do anything you need other than, your front court stuff. A lot of these roles we've been talking about, he fills a lot of those needs. And while I love Maxey, and he fills a lot of nice needs for us, you go further with Bradley Beal on your team than you do with Maxey. Wizards as a team suck at defense, but Beal absolutely can D up. I think with them being bad for a while has kind of affected in some cases his effort. But I think absolutely you want Bradley Beal. Let's see. Let me see if there's any other game notes I want to run through here. Then I'll take a couple quick questions before I got to wrap up this stream. Like I said, I'll be back throughout the offseason here. For the Mavericks, I'll have more what-if videos, more, lists and things like that, like 5 things the Mavericks need to address this offseason, whether, hell, an item on that list could just be a guy's 3-point shooting or something to that effect. KP, add muscle, could be an item on the list. And I'm actually going to have some sports journalism pieces as well that I do where I'm going to try and bring some original hot content to this channel because in case you forgot, I am in the process of completing a sports journalism degree to actually do this professionally, and I actually want to be out there covering this stuff, out there at the AAC in Dallas. I know that's not where they are right now, covering this stuff and following this team, giving you guys the best insight and information that I can. All the more reason to support the channel and become a member today. You want to drop a super chat? Whatever comment you got with the super chat, the stream will read back to everybody, projecting it out. Or, you can always just become a patron as well. Patreon.com/TheDallasProspect. Enough cheap plugs. Let's see, any other game notes I wanted to call out. So, as Dallas fell behind there, I called out earlier that they got out-rebounded by 10 in this game, and at one point in midway through the third quarter, the Clippers were leading in rebounds 40-27. That goes a ways. Yeah, Dallas was a pretty decent rebounding team this year, especially with Luka and KP both averaging, more than 9. But you already were without one guy averaging 9, and in this game, then they just didn't rebound great overall. Yeah, so that's the gist of the game notes I had on par. What about trading Powell for Jeremy Grant? Trading a guy coming off an Achilles for Jeremy Grant. I think Grant is a free agent, by the way, so I don't think that's an option. And to say trading a guy coming off an Achilles is never ideal. You're not going to get that deal. Because a guy could come back from an Achilles and be an absolute shadow of himself, or he can come back and be at least 80% of what he was Rare guys ever get back to 100% of what they were, and he was pretty maligned even at 100% of what he was. Do a list of 3-and-D guys we can realistically add, especially by trading Hardaway and Justin Jackson if possible. Maybe that should be a perk on Patreon. I'll do that. Tell you what, I'm going to tweak the Patreon for one of the tiers to set it up where you guys can actually vote on specifically what video or what if I put out next. Would you guys be up for that? Even just being at the $1 patron level, you'll get to vote on those things and actually steer the content of the channel. Some of the channels I follow and that I'm a patron of do that, and I think that's a really cool interactive thing that kind of gives you guys a voice. Brogdon, yeah. There was another question on here I wanted to address because I thought it was a good question, but now I can't find it. Yeah, Oladipo's a name that keeps getting floated out there. I'm interested. I am, but at the same time, I want to see. I know we got to see him some in the bubble, so you get an idea of what he looks like. I want to see what that market is because I don't feel comfortable giving him a max. But I think if you're able to get him for less than a max, he could be a solid option there as well. He did have like 2 breakout years, or I guess, yeah, 2 breakout seasons with Indiana, one of which ended in the torn ACL, I believe it was. And so he's been on the mend, and you could argue, let's see, Sage says he's 18 million 1 year left. Well, then there you go. So he wouldn't really be obtainable there. That would be an interesting fit. If that was plausible. Not one mention of Giannis. Oh, no one mentioned Giannis. Giannis is the pipe dream. If you somehow got Giannis, then of course you move heaven and earth to get Giannis. As we talk about scenarios wherein I say, okay, I will move on from KP. Yeah, Giannis. There you go. Only got for a young, like, there's certain deals where certain pieces are tradable or movable and others aren't. In almost any deal, I say KP and Luka are my only 2 untouchables. You put Giannis on the table, KP is suddenly very touchable. And that sounds a lot dirtier than I intended it to, but I digress. Yes, if you can get Giannis, you willingly move everything except for your 21-year-old superstar. By the way, you guys are killing it on here. Salute. We've got 8 new... actually, you know what? I think 10 new subscribers just during this stream. Thank you so much for supporting this channel, guys. It is a blast to talk basketball with you, and I intend to keep doing it for a long, long time. I want to get to a point where even as I'm actually a sports journalist, behind the scenes, actually with sources within the organization, talking with them, that I can come on here and talk with you guys. Now, I can't always share I can't share source names if it's in confidence or something like that, but I can absolutely mix it up with you guys and give you guys really the best content out there. I feel maybe I'm being a little bit self-serving, I guess, in that notion, but that's the idea for sure. Cousins for a 1 or 2 year deal. If it's like a 2 with a team option, I could be moved to trying it. But we're talking about a guy that's had back-to-back season-ending injuries, one of which he didn't even get past he didn't even get 2 preseason, did he? Before he had the latest one. So I'm concerned about his size and his body kind of breaking down on him a little bit. But we'll see. So, yeah. Salute to our new subscriber there. I'm going to have to wrap up this stream, guys. If one more of you want to join, we are 1 away from a flat 4,060 subscribers there. Pretty cool. But that's all I got for this video. Please Like the video, don't forget to share this content far and wide, drop a comment below, subscribe to the Dallas Prospect, and until next time, remember, every legend was once a prospect. Peace.